Well, hey there, folks. Welcome to the Roundup. I'm your host, Wendy Corr, and I'm a host of a podcast where we get to talk to interesting people and talk about their history, talk about their personalities, talk about why they are who they are. And I'm telling you, this is one of these conversations that I've been looking forward to for a long time. I have known retired former Senator Al Simpson for years. And Al has always been one of the most singularly interesting, but person who's interested in who we are, in representing us, in talking about the things that are important to us. And Al never holds back. And I love that about him. I love talking to you, Al Simpson. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation on Cowboy State Daily's The Roundup. Good
Well,
afternoon.
you know that I'll get my foot in my mouth many times in this little conversation, so just shoot it up.
All right. Well, we're just going to get going then. We're going to talk about Cody, Wyoming. Let's start talking about Cody, Wyoming. Al, you grew up in Cody. You and your brother Pete grew up here in Cody, Wyoming. Tell me about the Cody of your youth.
Well, it was a beautiful time, and it's still a beautiful time. I was born in Denver. There was one doctor here, and my mother gained about 40 pounds, and they didn't know quite this and she was a very trim and beautiful woman. So they put me on the train to Denver, and I was born in Mercy Hospital, and then they sat around and played gin rummy for a couple of weeks and brought me back. And Pete was born in Sheridan, and we're 13 months apart. And our parents married in 1929, and they were very deeply involved in the community and in Wyoming activities and national activities at every level. And that's something Pete and I observed and tried to emulate.
And of course, your father was the governor of Wyoming for a time.
He was, and then he was defeated for governor, and then he ran for the U.S. Senate, and he was elected. So he knew the ups and downs, but the thing that for Peter and for me was to see if there were any changes in them. In other words, the governor of Wyoming and the first wave of Wyoming, and then to the U.S. Senate and Washington and all those things, and we could see that there were no changes in mom and pop, and so both of us thought, you could get in that game and not be ruined.
That is something that I don't think we see a
Or
whole
get
lot of.
divorced.
Oh, very true. Well, and that is something that we don't see a whole lot of. You see people go off to Washington, D.C., and then they become a different person. And Al, what was your experience then? When did you get into politics?
Well, I ran for the state legislature in 65. It was the Goldwater debacle, and I took a lot of people. I was a precinct chairman, and we took people to the polls, and they said, "Oh, we're going to vote for your guy Goldwater. Just think he's great." And hell, our precinct came down 72% for Lyndon Johnson. So that was the end, but that was to learn about disappointment. You just keep doing it. Everything hangs by a thread. Nothing is certain. There's no way to say I'm going to pass this or going to kill this. You have to stay with the flow. And George Bush had it correctly. He said, "What would we do without family and friends?" That's what it is.
And that is something that has kept you solid, that's kept you grounded, is your family and friends for through all of your political career.
That is the key. Ann and I have been married 70 years on June 21st. Hopefully, we'll just have a little ice cream sandwich at the park or something. But no, we beautiful children and beautiful friends in Cody and at the highest levels. And whether it was, I learned a lot of. I worked in the fields at the TE Ranch. I worked as a concrete worker in reed construction. I worked in a creamery making cheese. and you wouldn't want to find out how we did that. We used our arms. We didn't have a thing that went around. You just got down there with your arms and mucked it
That
around.
that's the personal touch for making cheese.
Well, it is. But
Yeah.
anyway, no, and all those things took place. I've learned as much from cab drivers as I have from self-presidents. You always listen. If you listen, and I was involved in 20 years of law practice. A lot of it was domestic relations. There was murder, rape, incest, what the whole works. So you never knew what was coming in the door. But in the course of it, you knew that if you just listen to the person who's aggrieved and shut up yourself, they often solve their own problems because no one has listened to them in their own situation. They've closed them off. Your mother's got as big as butt as the oven over there. Tell her I'm ready to eat, and I have not taken to her for 2 days. Those are things that make people shrivel and die. So I'd listen and then I'd take notes, and usually we'd find some course of some relief or justice.
Justice. Very good.
Mhm.
Al, I want to back up to when you said you married Anne. I want to hear your story about you and Anne, because I actually got a chance to interview you once for a Valentine's Day article. And you and I and Anne all chatted about your love story. And I sure want other people to hear about you and Anne and how you got started.
Well, it's just not that tender. It's anyway. I saw her. I was playing basketball for junior high, and we played the Grable Buffaloes. In those days, that was our conference. And I saw this cheerleader over there. I really wasn't a charming fellow. I had knock knees and zits, and she ignored me, but I didn't ignore her. And that was I no. And then didn't she knew that neither Peter and I danced, and the Berlin boys all danced, and the Grable boys all danced. But anyway, then we got to the University of Wyoming, and we saw each other again, and she had been through a steady romance with some. Checking her. No, he he had a car, and he created
Oh,
cashmere sweaters. And I thought, how do I? And he looked like Victor Mature. If everybody remembers him, he was a muscular guy, handsome cat. And I just persisted, and she had been through a smothering relationship, and I had been through a semi-smothering relationship. So when we met, we didn't say, "Oh, I think we'll have lunch together, have a cup of coffee." I said, "Hell with it. I'm not going to have a cup of, I don't have to call you on Sunday afternoon or Friday night or something." And she was just as reticent as I was, not to have the control elements. Neither one of us enjoy control. And the worst thing about a marriage is that you marry a person to try to control them, you will fail. You will fail. The people you have think of, I'm going to change this guy or this gal, give it up. Anyway, so she was teaching over in Cheyenne, and I was in law school and running back over the hill to Cheyenne. And we were smooching one night behind the Allied beverage outfit, something. And I said, "What are you going to do this year?" He said, "Well, I've got a job offer in California and one in Cheyenne." I said, then I panicked. I mean, there was no semblance of sanity. But I didn't want to get married right then. And I said, "Now, Ann, if you stayed in Cheyenne, maybe we could get married." That was the proposal.
oh, that was just
And
so
she
not
said, "Well,
romantic.
I'm not ready to get married right now either, but it's that's something worth thinking about." So we waited a year, And here we went. And then we went overseas. I was in ROTC, and I was stationed in Germany at the end of the Army of Occupation with the 112th Armored Infantry Battalion of the 2nd Armored Division. She was with me. She joined me, and we had a great time. No children. She said, "We're going to wait on children until we see the world." I said, "That's a good deal. We haven't got nothing, kept not much, nothing to see on $300 a month." But anyway, we saved our bucks and we traveled all over Europe, Italy and London and Austria and France and on leave. And then when we got out of military and got some resources, we often went back to an area of around Paris. We loved that, and we get an apartment and stay for a month. Anyway, those were wonderful times. Then we have the three children. They're just a joy to us. And Bill is now 67, so we're 92. Bill
Oh
is
my goodness.
67. So Colin is 65. And Susie, she won't mind me saying that. She's 4 years younger than Colin.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. Very good.
And
Yes.
and they're a joy. We see them often. Can you imagine anything like living in Cody and have your three children and your grandchildren and your great grandchildren around you and available to touch and feel and see?
What a gift. What a gift that is. Very much so. Let's switch over to going to Washington, D.C., because you were in the Wyoming legislature for a number of years before you ran for office to go to Washington, D.C. Tell us about making that decision that you wanted to go for a national office in that way.
Well, I went to the state legislature in 65 and I was there for 13 years. And that's where I learned my craft. I learned how to be a member of the minority party and the majority party. And you're never going to learn anything until you have suffered in the minority and yet knew how something worked and how people trust you. You got people in both parties and both Congress and both here in Cheyenne who are safe. Nobody's running against them, and they get pretty cocky and they get pretty nasty and they get full of themselves. And full of means, full of whatever
Right.
on top of
Yeah.
that. Anyway, so I loved working with the other side. I was there as a legislator. I didn't want to administer. I couldn't be a governor of anything. I couldn't administer my way out of a paper sack. But I loved to legislate. I do the research, prepare the bills, do the floor debate, save it from getting vetoed, get it on the law books. And I did that. And when I went back to Washington, it was the same thing. My ranking members, I then became the ranking member of the majority, and my three ranking members were Gary Hart, Al Cranston, and Ted Kennedy. And I said to all three of them, don't use this committee for running for president. I won't have it. We'll do the nation's business, and we'll trust each other. And we shake hands, and they never neither one of them ever broke a promise with me. And they might have broken promises with others, but that's not me. So I enjoyed working with the other side. And you can't, unless you do, get out. Go be a zombie if you hate Democrats or hate Republicans. This is stupid.
That is something that you have always really championed is working across the aisle, working with that other party. That is something I'm going to kind of transition to current events here. That's something that is so missing. When did that change, Al? You've watched this and you've been a part of this system for so long. When did that change?
I think it changed when the U.S. House was under the control of the Democratic Party for 40 years. This is not a partisan statement. that was real. And I think that it was almost like a slave and a master relationship. The Democrats would have a hearing, and the Republican would wander in and say, well, I got an amendment there for that one. It's a good one. Here, a staff member will come up and grab it and say it is a good one. I think I'll put the boss's name on that, and so you can stuff it. And so they get tired of that. And then they began to come to the Senate. I would watch them come to the Senate. Were they supercharged to get to the Senate? No, they want to get the hell out of the House. They want to get away from the slave and master relationship where they had 40 years of getting it stuffed in their nose. So they bring the venom with them. They brought the venom with them to the House. I would say to my divorce clients, I know you're starting anew, but never haul the garbage to a new pit. Anyway, they would come over and slowly they'd start to say, well, you don't visit with Bumpers of Arkansas, do you? I said, hell, he's a good friend of mine, tells some great stories. And, well, yeah, but he's a Democrat. I said, I don't give he's a member of whatever. And then there's some guys who were issues of social issues. Are you a baby killer? I mean, what the hell is that? And now you've got people who say that you should a grown woman or even a child shall carry a person to term who has been impregnated by their father or their brother or their cousin. If that ain't cruelty, I don't know what the hell it is. And so that's where I think that's a very deeply intimate and personal relationship, and hopefully with the person involved or a pastor or priest walking through it. But it certainly doesn't have anything to do with the legislation of the United States of America. Because what's next? And then they hate queers. They hate lesbians and gays, and there isn't a single person in the range of my voice that doesn't have somebody that they're related to or the love is gay, lesbian, or transgendered. Just put that in your book, because I know people who prattle on in this party down there at this hole where they go to a church. They need to get a new place for the Republican Party. Church is a bad place for tolerance, understanding, and what would Jesus do? And you have to you just it's appalling, and you find them leading the charge on abortion, and they've had one, or leading the charge on a cousin or a brother who is one. And it stinks of hypocrisy, and it's tough to. One woman got up when I said at the last meeting where I was heckled, and I said, I want to tell you something, Buster. Shut up. I listened to you babble on into the vapors, and shut up. Two of them. Well, two of them came up and apologized afterward, and then I said, let's see, we're all treated equal. Is that right? And inalienable rights and happiness and all the things that go with the constitutional directives. And yet, what do we do with the people who are, if we're all God's children, what do we do with the people that are lesbian or marginalized or something? And a woman got up as I finished and said, maybe God made a mistake. And they were chuckling. There was a little bit of chuckling that went on with that. It's not a good place to be. If a young person is looking for a place to go into a party, you don't want to walk into that church over here. I can tell you that. You'll be savaged.
Al, the things that you say that you've been heckled and things like that, you are the definition of outspoken. You are the definition of speaking your mind, but educated because you, again, you're 92 years old. You have seen it all. You have been in politics for so many years. At what point did you say, you know what? I don't care about what people think of me anymore. I'm just going to go ahead and say exactly what I think. Have you always been that way, Al?
No, I never thought of it as to what people would think if I did that. I was thinking, what will I really do down in my gut instead of my head? There were tough votes, you know. There was the Clarence Thomas hearing. People come up to me and say, "You're the guy that saved Clarence Thomas." Well, I did, but you know, I made mistakes along the line, and some of them were. And I was rated the third most conservative senator in my 18 years, and here I've been tossed out of the party as a rhino. I mean,
Yes.
you got to keep your head around this joint. Mhm.
Tell me about that because like you just laid it out. Tell us about getting tossed out of your own party in Park County.
Well, they have a new rule, and I know the people that put it together because they're zealots. A zealot is a person who have forgotten his purpose, redoubles his efforts. There are two women in there that have, and they wanted to get this little thing. If you miss third or three meetings, you get tossed out on your can. There is no such thing in the law that provides that for death or resignation that has anything to do with doing three meetings. So they tried it and they failed, and some of the stuff is probably in litigation. And I'm not part of a firm that's doing anything of that. And they're saying conflict of interest. You have a law. I said that isn't the even point. The point is, it's not one of the reasons to throw a guy out of the party. So I've been called everything. I mean, I've had people in this county who when I reach out to shake their hand, they put their hand behind their head, behind their back. I said, you know, pal, that has never happened to me in a whole lifetime of politics or personal relationships. And he didn't even say anything. And then a woman came up and said, just leave him alone. You're picking on. I said, what the hell? A nut house insists. And that's what goes on here. And I'm going to run for precinct committee man in this district. If I get beat, hell, won't be the first time I've ever gotten beat. And then I'll go back to the meetings and I might go, we meet once a month. There isn't a Republican Party in Wyoming that meets once a month. They get together to torture each other and then talk about other people and what they can do to them or how they can rough up their lives. And all talk about freedom every time. Freedom, freedom, forget freedom. They want you you're either with them or you're against. And the legislators have little tablets in front of them as to what the state chairman is telling them to vote on an issue. And some of them don't even know what the issue is. They've never read a bill. They're like zombies. Send a zombie to Cheyenne, but or else send somebody that can answer your question when you put a hard one to them. Say, what the hell are you doing with this piece of legislation? What is this about? It's punitive, it's petty, it's social meandering. It's against somebody's life or freedom or happiness. Pursuit of happiness doesn't have anything to do with the Republican Party.
Wow, that has changed. Your Republican Party, Al, has changed over the years.
Not
And
kidding.
but and so we've there's got to be a bright spot in here someplace. What do you see in the future that's hopeful? What's hopeful about the future?
Well, I think it's at the ballot box. It'll never be with bullets in America. It'll be with the ballot box, and it will come probably. I don't know how I'll hang around, but I want to be around if I can. Is in 2034, the biggest system in the United States, Social Security, will drop 23%, period. And there ain't anything you can do about it or I can do about it because the money coming in does not cover the money going out. And whether Al Gore or whether said there was a lock box, the only lock box was in some great boogie land. But anyway, uh, so what do we do about that? Do they talk about that at the Republican committee? How do you stabilize the Social Security system? And there are ways to do that, changing the rates, the bend points. There's some technical stuff you could do, which is what Erskine Bowles and I were suggesting in our proposal. And so, and then the Medicare Trust Fund will take a hit in 2026. This is 2024. And why will it take a hit? Because a guy could have a heart operation who could own half the town and never get a bill for $250,000. Who is kidding who? So why not deal with the issues of America, the debt? What are you going to do about the debt? Where are you going to stabilize Social Security? And then they'll talk, where they throw it back, say, you hate seniors. That's what you do, boy. And veterans. Now, look, I'm a veteran. I was at the end of the war of occupation, World War II. And there are people who've never been outside of Camp Beetle Bailey and don't know a mortar two from either end who draw all the benefits of this country. I say, give the combat veteran or somebody in a combat theater anything they need. But for God's sake, don't start heaping stuff on people for that hell, only 6% of us were ever in combat. And they'll say, well, or they'll wear a hat, that says, I'm a wizard or something. It's tiresome to watch, and they're fake. And I've taken them on. I've said, don't give me that sob story about being in the military and being a veteran when you were in the headquarters company in Fort Dix, or you never left Camp Ord anyway. So you get in trouble. You say, hey, you hate veterans. That's it. You son of a bitch. That's it. You hate veterans. You hate old people. Hate them senior citizens. I guess you could say you hate agriculture. There are people who are serving me in the Wyoming legislature who will come back to any tax in Park County who draw big bucks from crop subsidies out on the flat out there. And that's public money. Don't forget, you can look it up. Just get yourself the thing about farm subsidies, Park County, Wyoming, the two districts of the zip code, and see who's knocking everything about anything taxes while they're getting stuff and try to beat out the Hughes tax when they buy a tractor in Billings. I mean, give me a break.
Al, you have got an opinion and a view and an educated opinion on everything. And I think that it's fantastic. And we want you to continue, please continue to tell us your thoughts because you have experienced it and you've got a wonderful, really great point of view. And we're grateful that we have had your experience and we've had your personality that has represented Wyoming and that's commented on Wyoming and that's been a part of the big picture in Washington, D.C. for so long. We only have a few minutes left, Al, but I want to hear about your friendship with George Bush because I know that you and Anne and George and Barbara were great friends.
Well, just one added touch there. I believed, and I believe to this 92nd year, that I'm an American first, instead of a Republican first, or a Democrat first. Where did we get that? Or as a veteran, if you went for the benefits instead of for your country, were you a patriot, or you're just looking for how to how to get a green check for the rest of your life by dismembering yourself at some kind of thing. So enough of that. George Bush, when the folks went back to Washington, they had a home. They bought a home, and Dad had Parkinson's and arthritic. He was rheumatoid arthritis, and he ran for an unexpired terms for when Gale McGee, when Keith Thompson was elected and died before he was sworn in. And Joe Hickey, the governor then, appointed himself as governor and for Senate, asked to the Senate, and then Dad ran against Joe. They were old friends, and they were very kind to us, Win and Joe. Anyway, to make it short, so it was. What the hell are your question? You want to do?
I wanted you to ask
Oh
about
yes, George and Barbara.
your
Well, that
friendship
was
with George and Barbara.
so when the folks sold their home, uh, a guy showed up from the Texas congressman. His name was George Bush. They said, well, their Simpsons have a home there, and they've got the extra rooms. Their children didn't come, and so George and Dad got together, and Dad took over George's father's office in the Senate. Prescott Bush retired. Dad took me to Washington to meet with the new senators, and that's where I met George Bush with his father, packing up his stuff to get out while I'm putting Pops in. And so it started there, and then through the years, there are pictures all over this place. But we had a great friendship. When he was vice president, we went to Glacier Park with him for about 4 or 5 days. When they were out of office, we took a tour with them to Greece. They were very dear. And when they were in vice presidency and the presidency, we were privileged people to be in the White House, private dinners. Uh, I remember during the Gulf War when they were protesting out in Lafayette Park, and George looked out the window. You could see the park from the dining area. He said, "Don't they know that I don't want war? I've been in war. I was picked out of the water after my plane crashed, and he was a war hero." And so he was always, but then he pulled the trigger on Saddam Hussein, and then he took the hand off the trigger because all these people were running back in their torn out tanks and stuff saying, "Viva George Bush, George Bush." And George said, "Wait a minute, this is, pull back. Don't follow them into Baghdad. Either people, these people are just sitting ducks." And they were just blowing them up, and they were trying to get back. They fled. They were all cowards because Dick Cheney pulled the train on them and turned off the forces of the furies of America. And in 13 days, they tore all of them to bits, and they were headed back, shrieking and crying. And so people said, "Oh, George Bush should have gone back there and taken them out in Baghdad." Well, he didn't, and then other things happened. But no, George Bush was a humanity. He's probably the most kind and gentle man I ever knew. And he lived with the code. What would we do without family and friends? And he loved music, and he loved golf. I never got into that one, but tennis and volleyball and just conviviality. And Barbara and Ann were very special because neither one of them could fake the other one out.
Aha.
And they thus saw that there was not anything to do but Barbara except Ann and they became very, very close. Too close. George and I, you just walk away from a game of Rummy Cube. Just said, let them fight. I don't get in, not into them. Anyway, a lot of fun. They were fun.
You have had some amazing adventures and you have had some amazing friendships and you have made your mark on this state of Wyoming that you love so much. And Al Simpson, we are grateful for you and for all of the service that you have given us.
Let me tell you a fun thing I did. I was at Harvard. I couldn't have got into Harvard. I picked the locks. I couldn't get in there. But John Williams called one day and I was teaching, said, I'd like you to narrate Peter and the Wolf at the Boston Symphony. And I said, I don't think I can do that. I'm pretty nervous about teaching. I've never taught anything at all. He said, well, I'll call you someday. So John Williams of Star Wars fame called me for the 70th anniversary at Rochester School of Music and gave me the thing he had done called the Reavers by Faulkner. So I did that there. It got so good that we went to Chicago Symphony and did it for 2 nights. We did it to the Boston Symphony for 2 nights and the Kennedy Center. And that was a joy. And I narrated the Reavers, about a 20-minute thing. And those are the fun things we've done since we got out. Just enough. I know you're on the timetable there, but
That is a great story. I had no idea that John Williams, the great composer, John Williams, had asked you to do that.
A dear man, dear friend, he came to be.
That's phenomenal. Al, you have so many stories, and there's no way that we can get to all these stories. But I want to thank you for sharing the stories that you have with us today on the Roundup. Al, you are a busy guy. I mean, we've had to work around your schedule because even at 92, you are still in demand. You're still doing Zoom calls. You're still doing interviews. What's next for you?
Well, in a half hour, I'll do something at a public policy thing in South Carolina for an hour with students.
Oh,
I do
awesome.
lots of things with civility in government and with the Simpson Manetta Library at Hart Mountain, which will be completed, ready for occupancy in July. $12 million to talk about racism and civility instead of raucous revenge and retribution. Or you got some big problems in River City. Anyway, it's a pleasure. I've been around you since you weren't a little girl, but we have known you a long.
We have known each other for a long time. You and Anne are dear, dear people, and you are truly Cody royalty, and we are grateful to have you. Al, thank you for your time today and for giving us your opinions and your experiences on Cowboy State Daily's The Roundup.
You're very kind, very dear, and thank you so much.
Thank you. And folks, thank you for tuning in to the Roundup. We've had a wonderful conversation with Al Simpson today. We've got more really great conversations to come. So tune in every week to the Roundup. You'll find us right here. And thank you for your time. Have a great week.
Thanks, Wendy.